This is a full story. Puppy wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. After 7 years of marriage, Rockey's pet canary grew tired of him. She left without a second thought, leaving behind only one sentence. "Rockey, I've made enough money. I don't need you anymore either." I watched coldly, curious to see how long Rockey would tolerate this. After all, this scene had played out constantly for the past 3 years. But this time, he laughed indifferently, a pet, and she really thought I'd care? Not long after, news came that she had died in a car crash. The man, always cold and distant, instantly lost his mind. After Serena's death, Rockey locked himself in his study, refusing to eat or drink. I knocked on the door, and the only response was an icy, "Get lost." I knew he was in a bad mood and wanted to apologize. But I bit my tongue, thinking how ridiculous I was. We weren't even divorced yet, and he had cheated and fallen out of love. Why should I say sorry? I looked at the cold dishes on the table. The soup I'd simmered for 5 hours had a film forming on top, giving off a faint, fishy smell. I dumped everything into the trash. Just like the 20 years of feelings between us, if I didn't discard them soon, they'd rot and breed maggots, disgusting me and everyone else. On the 8th day, Rockey finally emerged from his room. He tidied up, shaved, and returned to his usual unapproachable self. But when he looked at me, his gaze grew darker, as if her death was somehow my fault. I quietly watched him, waiting for the storm to come. After all these years together, 7 years of marriage, from school uniforms to wedding gowns, I always thought we'd walk the same path. But halfway through, someone chose to get off, and I seemed to have no choice but to accept it. "Where is she?" Rockey's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. After a long silence, I softly replied, "Buried." Rockey's face instantly darkened, his eyes filled with deep hatred as he glared at me. "Serena, who gave you permission to bury her? With your filthy hands? How dare you touch her?" His eyes were fierce, and he gritted his teeth as he spat out each word. I could feel that if I weren't pregnant, he would have strangled me right there. But I still overestimated my place in his heart. The next second, he pinned me to the couch, his large hand tightening around my neck, slowly squeezing the last bit of air from my chest. Everything spun, darkness filled my vision, and soon, I couldn't hear anything at all. His voice was crazed. "You really think just because you're pregnant, I can't deal with you? A bastard child. Do you really think I care? Serena's dead. Don't worry, you and your little brat are next." The suffocating fear made me try to call for help, but my throat was clamped shut, and I couldn't make a sound. I understood. Rockey truly wanted me dead. I don't know how much time passed before the pressure lifted, and a door slammed shut with a deafening crash. As I slowly regained consciousness, I sat there numbly on the couch. I picked up my phone and scheduled an abortion. Rockey and I were childhood sweethearts, bound together by a business marriage. Our parents arranged it when we were 3, and we got our marriage certificate before we even graduated college. Married life was harmonious and happy enough. Perhaps due to his upbringing, Rockey was unfazed by most things, never one to bend, love, or say sweet words. But after we got married, he still surprised me sometimes. On my birthdays, he would bake a cake himself, then pull out a necklace I'd been eyeing for a while and hold me tightly. "Haley, it's not that I don't have a heart. Just give me more time, and I'll find a way to love you. Please don't be disappointed in me." Whenever he said this, I would always nod firmly and softly tell him that we had a lifetime together. And in the quiet of the night, moved by passion, he'd whisper those secret words into my ear. Words that made my heart race and my face flush. When did things start to change? Perhaps it was the day Rockey met Serena. We had stayed up too late the night before, and the next day, I couldn't get up, so he went to our scheduled event alone. Serena was the assistant of the person he was meeting, fresh out of college, exuding nervousness. She smiled shyly, harmless and cute. She couldn't play golf and nervously asked Rockey to teach her. They exchanged contact information, and within less than 2 weeks, their relationship was confirmed. Serena quit her old job and moved to his company. Rockey kept her close, meticulously nurturing her like a rose on the verge of blooming. Ironically, I never even had a chance to confront Serena directly. Rockey hid her well, and my attempts to dig up information came up empty. Worse yet, my digging only led to Rockey's fury the next day. One time, after I spent a large sum to finally obtain Serena's personal information, I suddenly found a file in front of me detailing my father's affair. It wasn't just my father. All my family's dirty secrets were laid out. Rockey's warning was clear. If I went after Serena, my family's scandals would be exposed. That night, I smashed everything in the villa in front of him. And Rockey? He just sat on the couch, watching calmly, his expression like he was watching a mad woman. How ironic that now, he's the one who's lost his mind. That night, just as I was falling asleep, his assistant called me. "Miss Haley, Mr. Rockey is digging up Mrs. Serena's grave. Please come and talk him out of it." I laughed. I was the one Rockey legally married, yet everyone called Serena Mrs. while I was just Miss Haley. Ever since I decided not to go through with the divorce, Rockey publicly announced on social media, "Serena is my only wife for life." After that day, I became the laughingstock of Seattle. I forced a smile, my neck still faintly aching. His business, go tell his family. It has nothing to do with me. Then I hung up. I never thought Rockey would actually dig up a grave. Ever since he and Serena got together, we talked about divorce more often than we ate, but we never finalized it. Either I refused, or Serena found some excuse to pull him away. The last time was 2 months ago. Rockey was willing to give me half his fortune to get the divorce. I agreed. But the day before we were supposed to sign, I found out I was pregnant and stood him up. Rockey blew up my phone that day, and Serena died on the same day. When Rockey's father found out, he personally talked to him all night. Rockey listens to no one, but he always respects his father. The next day, Rockey withdrew everyone he had sent out and stopped searching for her like before. We never spoke again, and neither of us brought up the divorce. At the time, I thought even if he doesn't care about me, he must care about the child. Now I realize trying to use a child to hold on to a man was the most pathetic thing I've ever done. The next day, I had the abortion. I'm not selfless, nor do I want to be a single mom. I can live without love, but my child deserves to be born into a healthy family. The procedure was quick, and by the afternoon I was discharged and went home. Now that the child is gone, the divorce is just a matter of paperwork. Rockey hasn't shown up once in all this time, but of course, he's been busy searching the world for his mistress. He refuses to believe Serena is really dead. After 7 years of marriage, I didn't have too much, but I didn't have too little either. I called people over, placed a fire pit in the yard, and burned everything I could. The jewelry that wouldn't burn, I sold. I didn't want to take a single thing from this villa, nor leave any trace of myself behind, so I burned it all. When Rockey came back, he arrived just in time to see me throwing our wedding photo into the fire. I was a little surprised. After not seeing him for over a month, I thought he had followed Serena into the grave. Through the swirling smoke, his gaze was cold, as if he were looking at a dead person. He was carrying an urn, and as he walked past me, Rockey suddenly reached out and shoved me. If the butler hadn't reacted quickly, I probably would have been disfigured. A chill shot through my body. Rockey had lost his mind. He was using this to exact revenge on me. Rockey clicked his tongue, sounding a little disappointed. "Clean it up." Then he turned and went upstairs. A fire of rage flared up inside me. Rockey had an affair, and I endured it. He threatened me with my family, and I endured it. Serena's provocations, I endured. He got me pregnant while drunk, and I endured that too. Endure, endure, endure. I endured for 3 years. Now he's openly trying to kill me, and I refuse to endure it anymore. If that's how it is, then we all die. I quickly caught up, grabbed Rockey's arm, and spun him around. With all my strength, I slapped him hard. His head snapped to the side, and he glared at me with icy eyes. Seeing the slap mark on his face brought me a wave of satisfaction. Tomorrow morning at 9, we're getting a divorce. Serena's death wasn't my doing, so don't throw all the blame at me. You know exactly how I got pregnant, and the only reason I didn't go to the courthouse that day was because your mother took me back to the family home. Your mistress? It was your mother who ordered her burial, because she couldn't stand to see you like that. So don't go blaming everything on your dad. Rockey showed no reaction to my explanation. I didn't care whether he believed me, it had nothing to do with me anymore. I had made myself perfectly clear. As I left Rockey's villa, I thought back to the question he had asked. Do you know what it feels like to lose the love of your life? The love of your life? Ha! How did I answer at the time? Oh, I remember. I said, Rockey, you died to me a long time ago. When two people are in love, they don't see anyone else. The old me couldn't see Serena. Now, Rockey can't see me. So many years of love, are you really willing to let it go? Peter, a mutual friend of Rockey and me, had been involved throughout this 3-year-long love triangle. All the news about Serena had come to me through him. Willing to let it go? 7 years of entangled love and hate. I had fantasized about him changing his mind. But when Serena died, I finally understood. No matter which side you stand on, you lose. I chuckled lightly and flicked the ash off my cigarette. Ever since learning about Serena, I had picked up the habit of smoking. I didn't like drinking, afraid I'd do something I'd regret afterward, so I turned to smoking to release myself, hoping to soothe the numbness in my heart. Seeing my silence, Peter continued, Serena is already dead. You've endured him for 3 years, why not wait a little longer? He'll come back to you eventually. Besides, you're pregnant now. Even if Rockey agrees to the divorce, his family won't. I don't need their approval. No one knew I had already terminated the pregnancy. Peter, seeing he couldn't convince me, grew visibly anxious, swearing at me in frustration. Are you stupid? Serena might not even be dead. I frowned. What do you mean? He stayed silent for a while before gritting his teeth and spilling everything. Serena wasn't dead. That, I hadn't expected. She had run away in a fit of anger and got into a car accident. Rockey's father, hoping to help Rockey and me move on, and knowing I was pregnant, decided to declare her dead and hide her far away to make him give up. But no one anticipated Rockey's madness, digging up her grave in the middle of the night. Even his mother had no choice but to give in. She couldn't bear to see her son so heartbroken. That's why they brought her back. Peter sighed and, still trying to persuade me, said, "It doesn't have to end in divorce, Haley. I can see that he cares about you. Now that everything's out in the open, you can safely have the baby. With both your family and Rockey's watching, Serena won't be able to cause trouble." And then what? I stubbed out the cigarette and asked flatly, already having a good sense of the situation. He hesitated, seeing my indifferent expression, and swallowed the rest of his words. Ignoring him, I continued, "And then I'll just keep enduring it like before, watching Serena flaunt herself in front of me while they continue their old cat and mouse game? When I have the baby, do I and my child have to endure all this too? What if one day, Serena gets bored and fakes her death again? Do my child and I have to be buried with her?" I suddenly found it all absurd. I remembered how not long ago, Rockey had choked me and called my child a bastard, but then turned around and frantically dug up Serena's grave. He kneeled before his father, willing to take 30 lashes just to hear news about her, then came home and tried to push me into a fire pit. Growing up with him, I knew Rockey's dark side all too well. The irony was that even after learning about Serena's whereabouts, he still wouldn't let me go. After all these years of entanglement, was it that he never loved me, or that he stopped loving me? On the day of the divorce, Rockey didn't show up. I wisely didn't call him because I knew he was at the hospital with Serena. Though she hadn't died, she had multiple fractures and temporary blindness. Their brief separation had only reignited their passion, and they couldn't bear to be apart for even a moment. Rockey had even contacted the most professional treatment team from abroad. How deep his loves ran. I laughed bitterly. Since the papers were signed, I contacted my lawyer to push for a court settlement. There was no other reason, just to speed things up. I randomly bought a ticket to the south, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. As the plane took off, I gazed at the layers of clouds outside the window. I suddenly thought of my childhood with Rockey. Our families were old friends, deeply connected. After some discussion, our parents decided to buy houses next to each other. But my parents loved to travel, often going on separate trips all over the world. Back then, I didn't understand and once naively asked Rockey, "Why don't your parents travel separately? Is it because they don't love each other?" I was 7, and Rockey was 11, already acting like a little adult. He held back for a while before handing me a piece of candy. "From now on, I'll only play with you." I didn't understand at the time, and even after growing up, I was still clueless, so I asked him again later. By then, he had already graduated from college and was running the company, too busy even to have time to eat. It was a week before the end of my sophomore vacation, and he came home late that day because of work. So, we hadn't spent much time together that whole break. That night, foolishly, I asked the same question again. But this time, he didn't give me candy. I remember it clearly. He took off his jacket, cupped my face in his hands, and I saw emotions in his eyes I couldn't understand. Because he had been drinking, I could smell the alcohol on him, mixed with a faint scent of tobacco. I tried to back away, but he held me tightly, leaving me no room to move. His lips pressed close to my ear, whispering words that made my heart race. "Tonight, it's just the two of us playing." I froze, and before I could react, his lips crashed onto mine. The cool September night brought a slight chill, but nothing could stop the quiet bloom of flowers. The sound of the in-flight announcement snapped me awake. I had fallen asleep. I couldn't remember the last time I dreamed of my childhood. As I disembarked, I thought about what happened after that night. That night marked the start of my relationship with Rockey, with no dating phase. The next afternoon, he took me to get a marriage certificate, and then we informed my parents. I complained about how domineering he was, not giving me time to prepare mentally. He said, "I won't feel at ease until I marry you. We'll have plenty of time to date afterward. Haley, once you graduate, we'll have the wedding right away." Back then, I was completely immersed in happiness. I forgot that every step has its purpose. We skipped the dating phase, and later on, someone else filled in that missing time. After getting off the plane, I didn't bother running around or exploring. I simply picked a random hotel and slept until it was almost dark. Though I'm usually picky about beds, I surprisingly slept deeply this time. It felt like I'd been asleep for a very long time. And in a daze, I heard my phone ringing multiple times. I didn't answer and let it ring. When the battery finally died, I drifted back to sleep. When I opened my eyes again, 4 days had passed. As I recovered my energy, a hint of fear crept in. What if I had died here, and no one even knew? My phone was filled with missed calls and Facebook messages. I casually browsed through them, responding to a few that caught my eye. Then, I called both my parents. They've long stopped living together, but haven't divorced. It's not because of me. The main reason is that the people they're seeing outside don't want any official status, just happiness. Neither of them wants the hassle, and life goes by quickly enough that eventually they'll still be buried together. Other than their love for fun, everything else is fine with them. In the past, I thought I could accept a marriage like that too. After all, it was just a lack of love. At least they still respected each other. Close your eyes, and it'll all be over. But later, I realized that the reason my parents could maintain such a marriage was because there had never been any love between them. Naturally, neither cared what the other did. But Rockey and I had loved each other. We both knew what it meant to love someone, so I couldn't accept a marriage like that, just as he couldn't accept Serena's death. After hanging up the phone, I received 2 transfers of money. Undeniably, though my parents didn't love each other, they had tried their best to give love to me. Rockey also called, but I didn't return it. I chose to ignore it. We're divorced now, there's no need to dwell on it. After lying in the hotel for a few more days, I suddenly realized I had nowhere to go. Thanks to being born into a good family and under the care of my parents and Rockey, I've been exposed to things most people don't see for years. Before getting married, I would drag my friends to travel everywhere whenever I had time off. The vast Northwest, the Northern Lights in Scandinavia, the dreamy, childish pursuit of light. At night, lying in a tent in the wilderness, gazing up at the sparse stars hidden behind the clouds. Back then, I was bold, daring, and decisive. If I wanted to do something, I'd do it right away. But after marriage, I could only be Mrs. Rockey, careful not to embarrass him. Now, I am free. I picked up my old hobbies again, strolling around with a small bag every day, walking and stopping whenever I felt like it. Sometimes, when inspiration struck, I could create great artwork. My rebuilt social media account had even gained a decent following. I adopted a cat, but I'm terrible at naming, so I just called it Kitten, based on its color. Every morning, I'd wake up to find it curled up in my arms, softly meowing at me. It was so cute, it melted my motherly heart. But I never expected to see Rockey again. Holding Kitten, I opened the door to go out and saw Rockey standing outside. I was only surprised for a second before I understood. With his connections, it wasn't surprising he'd track me down. Inside, we sat facing each other on the couch, silently waiting for him to state his purpose. At this point, seeing Rockey again, I was unexpectedly calm. No questions, no arguments. We weren't even friends anymore. I didn't think he came to reminisce either. Kitten sensed something was off and hid in its little bed. Rockey glanced around before finally fixing his gaze on my face. "When are you coming back?" "Back where?" I asked. "Seattle." The air grew still for a moment before I could reply. "Grandpa is really worried about you. Serena, you're not a child anymore. You ran so far without saying a word. Have you thought about how others feel? Especially since you're still pregnant. Come back with me, give birth to the child. My mom will take care of you." Rockey's voice carried a hint of exhaustion, but his tone left no room for opposition. A wave of frustration surged within me. He still didn't know I had terminated the pregnancy. Of course not, his mind was full of Serena. He never cared about me. If he'd even looked into it, he'd have known that the bastard he once spoke of no longer existed. If his family hadn't forced him, Rockey would never have sought me out in this lifetime. Lowering my gaze, I let out a cold laugh, my eyes filled with even more mockery. "I've had an abortion. Thank your grandpa for me. I'll visit him when I have the time. You can leave now." Rockey seemed shocked at how straightforward I was this time. He shot up from the couch, his face dark as ink. Through gritted teeth, he growled, "Say that again. What about the child?" Fearing he hadn't heard clearly, I slowed down and repeated it. I said, "I've already had an abortion. Rockey, we're divorced now. From today onwards, please don't bother me again." With that, I went straight to my room. I didn't know when Rockey had left. When I stepped out, I saw a bank card on the coffee table. What was this supposed to be? Guilt? Compensation? After thinking for 3 seconds, I took it. After all, who would complain about having too much money? It was what I deserved. I returned to my carefree, peaceful life with just myself and kitten. There was no longer any trace of Rockey or Serena in my life. Only Peter occasionally contacted me, dropping hints about Rocky's situation and Serena's affairs. For example, when Rockey came to see me last time, neither his family nor Serena knew about it. For example, Rockey didn't take Serena back home but kept her somewhere else. And Serena threw a big tantrum, fought with Rockey for 3 days, and tried to disappear again. Only this time, Rockey didn't look for her, and she returned on her own. Peter asked me what my plans were, and I seriously thought about it. I didn't have any. Life goes on, and the world keeps turning. Whatever lingering resentment I had has long blown away with the wind. I just want to live the rest of my life well. But I never expected that Rocky's father would personally come to see me, with Rocky's mother by his side. I recalled my phone call with Peter last night, how he was evasive and tried to change the subject. Suddenly, I understood a bit of what was going on. Looking at the 2 elderly people sitting on the couch across from me, I felt both helpless and angry. Was this emotional blackmail? No matter what, during my time in Rocky's family, his parents treated me well, especially when the incident with Serena happened. Rocky's father did everything in his power to preserve my marriage with Rockey. It was already difficult enough for this usually upright and honorable head of the Rockey family. Haley, come back with Grandpa. I won't force you to stay with him. I've watched you grow up since you were little, and this old man doesn't know how much longer I have left. Just think of it as keeping me company. As for the matter between the 2 of you, follow your own heart. Hearing this, I couldn't help but feel a lump in my throat. Rocky's grandfather truly cared for me. He's already over 80 years old, his health far worse than before. The issue between Rockey and me shouldn't involve others. Rocky's mother sighed, her gaze fixed on my flat abdomen, tears welling in her eyes. Haley, are you managing all right on your own? Do you have enough money? Is your health recovering? She handed me a bank card. Take this money. If you don't want to come back, at least use it to buy yourself something nice. Nothing else matters. Taking care of yourself is the most important thing. Your parents haven't been around much, and I've watched you grow up. Now that things between you and Rockey have come to this, it's partly my fault too. I politely declined their kind offer. As they were about to leave, Rocky's mother seemed like she wanted to say something more, but in the end, she didn't. Once in the car, Rocky's mother called her son. She's doing fine now. Since you've chosen that woman, you should let her go. The child, is it really gone? Rockey asked softly. When he went to see her last time, he didn't even know why he did it. He had wanted to know how she was doing, but when he spoke, the words came out wrong. Upon hearing that she had really terminated the pregnancy, a wave of panic surged through him. He didn't know where this feeling came from. After years together, he knew her inside and out. She was tough on the outside, but soft inside. No matter how harsh her words were, they were just to vent her emotions, to make him care about her a little more. So this time, he thought she was just lying to get back at him by saying she'd had an abortion. But unexpectedly, she had actually gone through with it. I didn't want to be disturbed by Rockey anymore, but I had no idea where to go. If he wanted to find me, he could track me down no matter where I hid. I knew that the visit from Rocky's family last time was orchestrated by him. I didn't know what his intentions were, habit, or maybe a touch of lingering attachment, but none of that mattered to me anymore. I sat by the window all afternoon, still unsure of where I wanted to go. Before I turned 5, I was always surrounded by nannies and bodyguards. After I turned 5, besides the nannies and bodyguards, Rockey was there too. You could say he occupied the most important part of my life, but so what? My life is still long, and what's in the past is in the past. From now on, there will be no Rockey in my life. That's enough for me. I checked out of my place and booked a flight to Hong Kong, where my mom happened to be. Worried that I might be in a bad mental state, she dragged me around for quite a while, and introduced me to her boyfriend. He was a very elegant man. Yes, elegant. Completely different from my dad. He was thoughtful, always making you feel comfortable, without ever crossing any lines. Bane was the longest-lasting boyfriend my mom had ever had. He'd even proposed to her, but my mom refused. They'd broken up at the time, but later my mom made it up to him, and now they were getting along well. Seeing the radiant smile on my mom's face, I couldn't help but smile too. Who needs love? Life is full of beauty. But can anyone tell me why people who shouldn't be appearing keep showing up again and again? A week after arriving in Hong Kong, I ran into Rockey again. A sudden surge of anger rose inside me. Thinking back on everything, the times he appeared out of nowhere, his family's visit. If I still didn't understand, I'd be a fool. I lifted my eyelids and spoke coldly. What do you want? Do I need to repeat myself? We're already divorced, Rockey. Can you please, for the love of God, stop showing up in my life? Everything has gone the way you wanted wanted. The bastard is gone, and we're divorced. You can go ahead and marry Serena. Have as many kids as you want. I don't understand why you keep showing up in front of me. I blocked him at the door, saying so much. Talking about the past, Serena. The 3 years that nearly destroyed me. And the child I lost. With every word, his face turned a shade paler. And by the end, I felt a sense of relief. But Rocky's face had grown ghostly white. His hand gripping the doorframe so tightly that the veins stood out. I couldn't shut the door. We just stood there staring at each other. At this distance, I could clearly see the pleading and pain in his eyes. After a long pause, he finally uttered, "I'm sorry, I regret it, Haley. Forgive me, will you?" I replied simply, "No," and closed the door, shutting out everything outside. That apology came too late. I no longer needed Rockey. The love triangle from back then had already consumed far too much of my time. I had neither the courage to revisit it nor any intention of looking back. After that day, Rockey moved into the apartment next door. Whenever I went out for a walk or took Kitten for a stroll, I'd turn around and see him trailing a little distance behind me. He didn't speak or get close, and I pretended not to notice him. As time passed, the landlady and the neighbors downstairs became curious, asking me who he was. I told them the truth. He's my cheating ex-husband. People gasped in surprise, and many offered me advice. Your husband is so handsome and rich. Cheating is normal. As long as he's willing to come back, just turn a blind eye. Exactly. It's no big deal. All you have to do is have a child and secure his assets. Then no other woman can cause trouble. How ridiculous the world is. The man is clearly the one at fault, yet no one tells him to change. Instead, they urge women to swallow their pride. When the landlady heard the story, she pitied Rockey. She even reduced his rent by half and told him, "You've got a great wife. Don't let her go. I may be old, but I'm not blind. I can tell Haley still cares about you. Otherwise, why haven't I seen her go on a single date all this time?" The landlady spoke earnestly, even patting Rocky's hand in encouragement. I shook my head, feeling a mix of frustration and amusement. Is it just that people start imagining things as they get older? Even my mom recently has been subtly asking if I've considered getting back together. I told her quite seriously, I'm not a recycling bin. I don't take back garbage. I don't want to move again. It's exhausting, and Kitten can't handle it either. But the constant gossip is getting on my nerves. It's like Rockey knows when I leave the house. Every time I open the door, I run into him. And when we go downstairs together, the neighbors from across the hall give us knowing smiles. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Rockey, you want me to forgive you, right?" This was the first time I'd initiated a conversation with him since he moved in. He paused mid-motion as he opened his door, his eyes full of hope as he looked at me. "Yes, what do I have to do for you to forgive me? Whatever it is, I'll do it." I knew he wasn't exaggerating. He really could do almost anything. "Rockey, you've done so many things that hurt me. Why are you so sure that just a few words would make me forgive you?" His face turned pale in an instant. He wanted to say something but realized that no words could change anything. Because deep down, he knew he was a jerk. And the things he'd done in the past, even without mentioning them, they haunted him every night, flooding his mind, refusing to be ignored. All that's left is endless regret. Rockey left. That night, he left in a rush. 3 days later, I received a call from Peter. "Rocky's in trouble. You should come back and see him. It might be your last chance." After much thought, I booked a flight back to Seattle. As I boarded the plane, I received a text message, then turned off my phone. I admit, I'm not a good person. The way I was raised taught me that if I couldn't swallow my anger, I should wait, it might pass, or perhaps a better opportunity would arise. When I arrived at the hospital, Rocky's condition had stabilized, but his legs were gone. He would be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. I offered a few words of comfort to Rocky's mother, then entered the room. Rockey was hooked up to countless tubes, the ventilator beeping steadily beside him. The doctor said whether he'd wake up or not depended on fate. I leaned in to look at his face closely, still as handsome as ever, enough to make my heart skip a beat. But it was too late. There was no going back. Our conversation that day was simple. I didn't do much. I only told Rockey to get back all the money he'd spent on Serena over the past 3 years. And then I'd consider giving him another chance. I don't need money, and neither does Rockey, but Serena does. Her family wasn't well off, though she was an only child. Her parents didn't give her much love or financial support. She'd spent her whole life with very little. When she got the chance to latch onto Rockey, she wasn't going to let go easily. 3 years is neither short nor long, but her appetite for luxury had already been fed by Rockey. It's easy to move from frugality to indulgence, but nearly impossible to return from indulgence to frugality. During those 2 months in Hong Kong, every day I'd secretly take pictures of Rockey doing things for me and send them to her. The man who once cherished her like a treasure. That drastic contrast can drive people to do crazy things, especially when the man she loves comes to her, not because he misses her, but to demand she return the money. She'd already spent it all. I roughly calculated that over the 3 years, Rockey had spent over 500 million on her, at least on the surface. When people are pushed to extremes, especially when they can't have what they want, they're likely to do things they'll regret for the rest of their lives. Sure enough, when she couldn't have him, Serena's impulsive nature led her to crash her car into him. After leaving the hospital, I drove to a remote warehouse. When Rockey's accident happened, Serena was immediately arrested. But because of their high-profile, 3-year romance that captivated Seattle, and with Rockey's family focused solely on him, no one was paying attention to her. People just assumed the couple was having another spat. So, it wasn't hard for me to bail her out of the police station. The man in charge, I'd seen him a few times, he worked for my father. When he saw me, he came over immediately. "Miss Haley, she's inside. How would you like to handle it?" I nodded and walked over to a table filled with strange tools. Reaching for an odd-looking toy. "Use all of them, but leave her alive for the police. Everything else is up to you." Understood. In this vast city of Seattle, everything and everyone here is familiar to me. But now, I have no reason to stay. I've always said, I'm not a good person. Serena's 3 years of provocations, Rockey's favoritism, and the endless mocking voices. I became the laughingstock of the entire upper class. And then, there was the child I lost because of Serena's provocation. I lay in the hospital for 3 days, and Rockey didn't come to see me even once. That was the first time I learned Serena existed. Rockey had hidden her well. It took me 6 months to figure it all out. Before, when I didn't know, he could lie to me. But after I found out, he was honest. I still remember that day. I had just returned home from the hospital. He was sitting on the sofa, holding a piece of jewelry he'd won at auction. And I could faintly see a name engraved on it. Serena. He said, "I've fallen in love with someone else. If you don't want a divorce, you can still remain Mrs. Rockey." Then he added, "But don't let me find out you've done anything to harm her." And then he left. From start to finish, he didn't ask me how I was doing. He didn't ask why I hadn't come home for 3 days. Why I looked so pale, why I was so weak. At that time, his mind was entirely consumed by Serena. Serena was tortured until she was unrecognizable, then sent back to the police. With just a word from Rockey's family, her time in there wouldn't be easy. She should thank me. After all, I've already paved the way for her. Whatever suffering she endures now will be nothing compared to what I went through. I returned to Hong Kong and resumed my normal life. Perhaps because I'd been away for so long, Kitten seemed distant, refusing to rub against me. I heard that Rockey had woken up. When he learned his legs were gone, he was eerily calm. He only asked one question, "Where is she?" Peter didn't know how to respond, so he stayed silent for a while. "She's gone, Serena, she's dead." Rockey didn't say another word. His face remained calm as he ordered everyone out of the room, then proceeded to smash every machine in it. In the end, all you could hear from outside was the muffled sound of him sobbing. I continued my usual walks. Sometimes I'd think about the empty house next door. I raised my eyebrows and decided to move. People, they can look back, but they shouldn't walk back. The end. If you like Puppy's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.